One.
You're now watching two old farts making noises. Welcome to Canadian Art Today with your host, Paul Constable.
And here we are live. Ooh, who knew?
Live
So,
again. That's a good
live
thing.
again. How are you?
Get up every morning. It's good.
I know, right? It's good to be alive because if it's the other, it's so boring.
Yeah,
So
there's so many in that other crowd. I don't want to go there.
that is true. The problem with that is nobody knows, right? So you don't know if it's boring. It could be more fun.
Well,
So,
you never know if you don't know. It's sort of like maybe you can watch from above. I don't know. Or below.
or
where you
below,
are.
depending. I have real estate in both places because I'm just not sure who's going to win the war. So I just think it's easier to do it that way.
Well, there
So
we go. Perfect.
there you go. And today you have a very exciting guest for us.
We always have exciting guests.
Yes.
I'm really fortunate for that. I mean, we try to mix it up a little bit, but today we have a abstract expressionist painter. So we're really going to talk about what makes that happen. Like
Right.
why people paint like that, why people like to buy that, why people like it. Do people like that?
Right.
And she has a ton of experience. Well educated and knowledgeable, and she's got a body of work that you wouldn't believe. I mean, even through 2023, she's already had a major show already. So, still the paint. I think the paint's still wet. I'm not sure.
Wow.
Yeah. So we're gonna welcome Gwen Tooth. Welcome,
There
Gwen.
she is.
Hi, how are
Hi,
you
welcome
today?
to the show. Good. How are you?
Doing
Hello,
well.
Saskatoon.
Saskatoon,
I've been there actually.
Yeah. We're wet right now. There's actually raining, which is sort of a good thing, not sort of a good thing because they're trying to harvest crops. But generally, it's going good. I'm at the lake and it's raining, so I can do a video and we can talk and do our shtick, I guess, and we'll talk about some of your work. I mean, you've got lots of. I never mentioned the credits here, but you know, you have BFA and you've got a from OCAD University and a BA in Western University. So you've been through the educational loop a lot, but we'll talk about that a little bit. You know how that's affected your work in the long term. Was that later in life educational process that you went through, or
The first BA was when I was about 18, 19, just before I got married. So that was a long time ago. 1967, I graduated. And that was more in business admin and other things, but I took a lot of literature on the side and squeezed in a bunch of extra courses. They used to say I took Tums for lunch, but anyway, I got through that. And the BFA was much later in life.
yeah?
I worked part-time to go to OCADU and get my interdisciplinary diploma. It took me 17 years part-time. And then I had a chance when OCADU became OCADU in university to be invited back to complete credits to get a BFA.
Nice.
So for a year and a half, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote essays. That's what I needed to finish the BFA.
Yeah,
And it helped.
yeah. Well, the hoops they make you go through, but
Yeah.
a writing skill, you can't ever go wrong with having a bit of a writing skill. Communication
No.
is essential if you're doing any kind of proposals or grant writing or anything. You need to speak clearly with a pen or computer or whatever your written material choice is. But I think that's one of the I would say some of the drawbacks on some of the up and coming artists and even some of the older artists is understanding that the writing skills are essential to success. I guess if you're gonna call in other people to help you do what you do, in other words, have a show, or you have to explain very clearly in a few hundred words what your show is about. Am I correct in that?
Absolutely. And yes, I did during the BFA time have to take a course in English and learn how to write an essay bit by bit. So I had a formula. But yeah, writing has also always been one of my creative interests. So I enjoy writing about my work.
You write
And
poetry at all?
it's a very important part.
You write poetry at all? Poetry?
No, not really. If I had more time, I would write. I don't know what. I just like the process of writing, and I'm
I
a
think,
fierce proofreader too.
yeah. I'm a terrible proofreader, terrible speller, but thank goodness for some spell check. But I find that I like to write a little bit, sometimes inspired by some of the paintings, or maybe a walk or something that I've been on, or something that I feel close to. That will affect what I'm painting, for instance, or sculpting or whatever. But and the writing tends to be more in my sketchbook or something, like more like a journal, a little bit. Just it's an audio, if you read it out loud, part about my work, if that's what I did. But let's talk about some of your stuff. Abstract expressionist painter. So many of us, we've heard that before, that terminology, but can you explain a little bit about what that means to you, like that process?
Well, I like to call myself an expressionist painter, and it is abstract, but I don't call myself an abstract expressionist. But I have been to lots of abstract expressionist shows. I've read books about every one of them, I think, detailed books, and been very into them. But also, I certainly read and learned a lot about the Painter's 11, and every time I get rejected from an association, I realize that Harold Town didn't get accepted, but it didn't hurt his career.
Yeah, yeah, you get, everything from, and I guess so just the famous, the Jackson Pollocks of the world, and a number of those that were, I guess, breaking ground in some of that early stages of it. But some of that even goes back probably, 1800s. There's, some of our, again, more dominant people that are painters that are on our minds most of the time, had versions of that in their work a little bit. The Cézannes of the world, and they were experimenting with. But even Turner, you look at some of Turner's work, was very much, if you got close to that, it was very abstract and
Absolutely.
somewhat surreal, even, actually, if you really looked at some of that. So, where does your inspiration comes from? Where does it come from?
Basically comes from nature. I grew up in Huron County, and we used to summer on Lake Huron, in Port Elgin, actually. And I used to go for long walks along the beach, and I've just always kind of been a bit of a loner and like to soak in the atmosphere and the breeze. And we just actually took a visit to Southampton this past Tuesday, and I hadn't been in a few years for pandemic reasons. And just sitting there and feeling the breeze and listening to the waves, that's kind of in me.
Yeah.
And I find from all my paintings, when I pick a series, it's usually about some form of water or nature. And how it evolved is I've always been a different painter. I was afraid to go to art school because I thought it might destroy my own sense of color. But anyway, I survived it.
I'm gonna get Stephen to start our slides up here. And if he's there, I'll be walked away from his set. But we'll just talk. There we go. We got slide one. Yeah, sorry to interrupt you, but I think
okay.
I need some visuals
I
up
could
here.
talk for hours. I love talking about my work.
Well,
I'll put the scarf on. That's the scarf that's in the picture.
Yeah, well, I can see the similarity for sure. You love warm colors. I mean, red's probably, I guess I'll only just say warm primary colors.
Yes, they're often straight out of the jar or the tube.
Okay.
And I put gloves on, and I just take chunks out with my hands quite often. My hands become my brushes.
So you become actually one with the canvas and the
That
piece.
is true.
Yeah. So this show you presently just had, or just in
Yes,
2023.
and I just painted them in the fall of last year.
Right.
And I had the ideas of lemons floating around in my head for years, because most of my work is really about different forms of water, like Niagara Falls, tsunamis, whirlpools, you name it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about the light on the surface of the water. It wasn't long before the horizon in my first series disappeared, and it became about the surface of the water and the lights and the bouncing, and that's how it became more expressionist and abstract. So in this series, I just needed something to perk myself and everybody up. So we've all been through a few gloomy years,
Yeah.
and for various reasons. And I had trouble getting supplies during the pandemic, so I'd go into an art supply store and I'd get what I could. And for a while, there was a shortage of really large canvases. Anyway, I thought I'll take these few and I can work that into a show.
Yeah.
And when I know where I'm going to book, I treat it as an installation, like as if I'm standing in the middle of the room and can walk around and experience it. So they all have to fit together. And I have the theme. And how I came to abstract these is I developed over the years from different teachers my own concepts of abstraction, and one of which is zooming in. This one, for example, is zooming in on a bowl of lemons. I just put some lemons out on the table and took many pictures of them, and from that did very abstract sketches. And it's kind of there and it kind of isn't, but it's about the light and it's about the energy. I take big movements. Even with smaller paintings, I try to work from my shoulder rather than from my elbow or my wrist, because the results are different.
Right.
So this is very loose and free. And I just felt I needed to be very loose and expressionistic with a different subject matter than I normally do. So I called the show Let Loose, like just paint what you want, which is what an authentic painter should do anyway.
Right.
And I like to be authentic.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's kind of it's a monochromatic format. So you haven't introduced the rainbow of color, right? So it's just sort of, a lot of the more sophisticated paintings tend to be from works that have minimal palette. They can be bright and definitive like they are like this one, but it seems sometimes, I guess you fall into the impressionistic aspects of painting when you start introducing the true complementaries against each other, right? And this one has a sharpness about it. Like, I don't see the lemons in there, but I do now after you mention it. But this is what's nice about these kinds of work, right? You see different things. I see a pumpkin in there right now, presently, but there's yeah. So the reds and the yellows, is that just to give yourself some warmth and feeling and that energy that you're looking for? Is that the palette?
Well, yes, kind of. With this series, I did what's called a mother color on all the canvases to get started. And this was probably an orange mother color, and I always let that color show through a bit. So yes, I do like to stick with a very essential palette. And I always believe that less is more. Just pick maybe 4 to 5 maximum colors and work with those, because if you have too many, you just tend to have a modge podge. I know artists that use many colors very successfully, and I always appreciate what other people do. It's not me. I like to be very simple, very essential and authentic. And I just like it to be a bold, free statement. Someone said to me the other day about a painting I had in a show, it's unapologetically bold. So I hadn't heard that before, but that's what it is. It's about
Put it on a t-shirt. If it's good, you can put it on a t-shirt. That's what unapologetically bold. That's a good statement. That's a really nice general summation of the character of yourself. Like,
yeah,
it would be a great, if you had to put a one-liner on your shirt, and a lot of times people laugh about shirts, but if it's sort of like a slogan line that sums you up a little bit. And if you have that, you know how you get a lot of shirts are just adjective, or they support a Nike or something like that, a statement, just do it, or something, a statement. So Stephen and I were just talking about this kind of thing with t-shirts, and it's kind of what do you wear? What you wear is what you say and what you believe a lot of times. So I don't belittle shirts, but I think they're advertising, and they promote you in whatever way you want to be promoted. But I like that statement. I like that bold statement.
Yeah, well, in 2 cents, I must ask the artist if to let me use it. But she's a member of a cooperative I belong to called Propeller Art Gallery in Toronto.
Right.
So this one, it's lemons too, from another viewpoint. I just did them from, and also I do sometimes sketches of things, but I don't really use those sketches when I paint. I just kind of paint from memory and do it very freely and not worry about the accuracy.
Yeah.
I've got all that classical training, and I've done pen and inks and all kinds of detailed things. And I spent many years doing portraiture, but they all ended up being Fauvist and expressionist. It just seemed to be my natural direction.
Yeah.
So in the last painting, actually, I saw a figure. I also do abstract figures. So in this one, I've stuck with the same basic colors with the orange mother color. And I've used the color in a way that I have always taught and has been my favorite, which is inherent value of the color. So we did all these little swatches in color school where you had to do one where you match the color to what the appropriate gray value was. And I'm doing that subconsciously without thinking about it when I paint.
Mm.
So, and in many cases, I'm also trying to have very, very shallow perspective and flatten it as much as possible.
That's a very Cézanne thing, though, too, right? It's just some of those are just to flatten up, flatten plane, look at solid colors, look the color that is adjacent to it. So this one, you're going through three colors, basically yellow, orange, and red. That is, but I like them, like you said, the mother palette holds the painting all together.
Absolutely.
As one piece, and then you can freely go about what you're doing. Excuse me. I'm getting a little hoarse.
I get that too.
Frog in my throat every once in a while when I start talking too much. But no, it has a nice free feeling, and I think there might be one more here where in that series that no, we're just something a little bit different. So here we go. So this one tends to be a little on the golder side, I think. But
yes, I've always liked metallic colors, and I've always used golds and bronzes and different.
They're hard to reproduce in video and stuff and film. The golds, metallics, but when
the way I like to paint is hard to photograph sometimes.
They are a photographer's nightmare. Usually, the lighting, it's really hard to get that color palette. Metallics, the right kind of sheen on them. But so this one is, I guess, it's probably still that lemons that you're doing, but they're.
This one is kind of evolved in this show. I used two different themes, but they're all connected. Some of them were abstract portraits.
Okay.
And I did a series years ago based on the paintings of Ket Kollwitz. I was taking portrait drawing at the time, and the teacher that I had, Brian Smith, was saying, your work reminds me a lot of Ket Kollwitz. And so I went and bought every book and catalog I could and really researched it, which I like to do. And I ended up doing a show of black and white and gray paintings of just large abstract figures based on different scenarios of life. And there were kind of like jealousy and rage and calm and different moods, which is another aspect of abstraction, which one can use as a diving board to spring into a certain stream of abstraction.
Yeah.
So this is an abstract figure. And you might have to fight to see it, but when you see 5 of them on the wall, they kind of all belong together, and they went very well with the lemons. It was a nice contrast, but they all ran together, so it was a perfect installation.
So when you paint, do you paint standing up or sitting down?
Mostly standing.
Yeah.
Occasionally I will do things flat. I did a series once that was all red paintings, and I did like 5 layers of pure red. And I don't believe in using mediums. I wanted the pure color effect for that particular show. And so they were flat then, but then when I put them up on the side and intentionally did dripping on them to for the effect I wanted. So for these I was standing up, yes. I have a very small studio, which I really can't invite people into, and I can barely walk around in it, but I've got so much stuff in there and so much that comes out of it.
Yeah. I think we're all like, we can fill a Quonset up usually as an artist if you can. We'll use the space given and some. Mine
I could buy a barn and fill it with studio space.
that is the proverbial problem for a lot of artists that paint large.
Absolutely.
Sculpture is probably one of the worst. Just the amount of floor space it occupies. So what do you do with all your work? The storage issues and that.
The storage issues. Well, it is an issue. I have them in my home. I had help getting rid of them on a couple of occasions. We had 2 major floods many years ago, and the first flood destroyed a lot of work. But I was able to come up with a price formula, kind of similar to the formula I use for pricing my sales, and get reimbursed for that. But that got rid of a lot of huge works. And then another time we had another flood. We've been lucky lately, but it certainly is one way of reducing the volume. I also belong to, not pleasant, but I just always say, well, I can always paint some more. So new ideas keep coming.
Yeah. You need to do a flood series probably.
I don't know if I'm ready for that yet. Hurricane's on my list.
Yeah, you just have to use the existing works and create something from it. But
you
mentioned that you talk about installations with your work as well. So are they mostly just the 2-dimensional aspect of installation, so they become a body of work?
I look when I know the space I'm going to show in. I go in and visit it several times, and just sort of figure out where things are going to go, and how I see it evolve in my head. A lot of my preparation is not actually sketching on paper, but mulling around in my head.
Right.
I'm a walking mulling around person. If somebody stops me, I would say pardon, and because I'm working on something in my head. So then when I start to paint, I have all my paints organized, and all this takes time. You don't realize it, but then when I start to paint, I paint very quickly. I did the whole series in less than 2 months. Yeah. But then it takes a year to get ready for a show. So first you paint them, then you got to photograph them, then you've got to work on some marketing, and you have to do that 3 to 6 months ahead of time. And then there's the last minute stuff of, getting the cards written and posters and all that kind of stuff. And that's all evolved over 10 years too. I started showing in 2009. And that was right after I got my BFA. I found that opened a lot of doors for me to get that extra stage. And I started teaching at that time. And it's funny, I come from a family of teachers. My parents were teachers. And I was on a committee. You always have to join a committee when you belong to a cooperative. And so I was on the workshop committee, and I had all these ideas. And one of the women said, well, Gwen, why don't you teach that? So that's how I started teaching.
Right. I don't know if you, like with myself, I was at a plateau in my work at one time, and then I said, if I teach, that might help me get out of this, where this doldrum I was at the level. And I found after 2 years of teaching, I taught nights a little bit into that water's doing watercolor. So I found it made me research my work better because I had to talk and teach about it. And I went back to school and my own books and different things and reevaluated what I was doing. But my work went to a different level after that. I noticed it dramatically different. I didn't have the block that I had before. The energy came back, the ideas came, and I guess the confidence level. Do you find that as well when you taught, that you learn things differently, better?
Yes, it forces you to think about simplifying things. And after I got my BFA, I went and took a lot of classes and watched how other people taught and learned how I didn't want to teach. I didn't want to be someone that, was very stern about it. I wanted it to be an open environment where people could experiment and not be judged and feel free to just loosen up. Loosen up is the theme of my existence. So I taught at Halliburton for a few years. I haven't gone back since the pandemic, but I'm welcome there to teach anytime. And I came up with some concepts, sort of 3 basic concepts of abstraction. One is like working from figures and energy, and another one is zooming in, as we all know from cameras. And the third one is pure abstraction of colors and shapes and nothing in mind. And then everything else is a blurring of all of those. And I've seen so many people be so afraid of abstraction that if I teach a 5-day course, it's not till the afternoon of the 3rd day that people really start loosening up.
Yeah.
And
Do you think that I know a lot of artists, they don't like to explain their work. They don't like to talk about a lot of things. Are very, very superficial about that. They'll just talk about maybe a little inspiration or something, but they really don't want to explain about any of their work. So I found that it's a conversation. It's a language that you're writing on in yours, canvas or paper or whatever. And then you have an audience that comes to your show, for instance, or looks at your work, and some leave right away. They have a comment, but it's unjustified because they really haven't understood the language. So how do you go about explaining like the language of your art to people?
I love to talk about my work, and I talk openly to people about it. I think why people come and leave is they don't understand abstraction and they're afraid to ask. So in a cooperative environment, I get to sit the show on the weekends and talk to people. And through our cooperative, we can have an artist talk. They used to be on Zoom, now they're kind of hybrid, and a lot of them are live now once again. How do I explain it? If I just say, like, it's things that are going around in my head, like these oblong ones, they're 12 inches by 48. I got 5 of those at Curry's when they were open. And I said, I can work with those. I'd never worked with that shape before, but that was what was available. So I painted these with a black mother color. And then I've always liked gold and metallics. So there's a gold paint on there, and there's kind of a pewter and a silver. And it's just shapes and gestures. And they come from maybe a long history of figure drawing, which I did at art school. And sometimes they just come from shapes. Like, I often don't see what's in them till after I've done them and they're hanging on the wall, and I can spend some time with my work in a gallery. And I can see now, like retrospect, I can see some Paul Klee and the one on the left. I can see some figures, I can see some lemons. It's the same gestures. So, and they're all unified because they're all done by me. That's the thing.
Yeah. I sense there's it's a bit of scrambled kind of Chinese chop a little bit because of the long vertical. They can, like Chinese writing, right? And
It's kind of like calligraphy, yeah.
it is. It has a very calligraphy feel about it. You're right. That's probably what I'm saying more than that. But I've seen a number of just Chinese writing, which is beautiful. The brushwork is just fluid, and all the characters are all connected, but they'll write vertically down the page. And that's kind of conjures that up in me, and just kind of a but with the black background, it really gives it that it flattens the surface up, like you were saying before. You're looking at flat
Mhm.
page, and there's depth isn't what it's about at all. So, and I do like the fact that these things are going in and out of off the page, in the page, right? So
Yeah, exactly. No, I
creates
don't.
a little bit of eye excitement. So, but I can see the confusion to a lot of people trying to understand if they come in cold and say the curator needs to be speaking on your behalf. What does that curator say, or the gallerist who is presenting your work while you're say not there, right? So it's that conversation that how much information do you give those people, like your curator and your gallerist, for instance, about the work and the process. They're trying to make sense of a show, or they're trying to sell your work for you, right? So uh, how much information do you give to your gallerist and your, like say, a curator? Do you have curators do your show? Yeah, are your shows curated?
No, with this cooperative, it's an artist-run cooperative with a director, and there are certain roles the director plays, like by a certain time limit, you have your images that you send in and your artist statement and anything else you want to say about the work. And one of these paintings actually sold. One person that was an art major herself actually liked it. She'd been coming to my shows for years, and she's bought a couple small paintings recently. But I find that it takes time for a true developer of my kind of work
Yeah,
to buy. It's not just come in, oh, I'll get a small one and go home. It's kind of like I've grown to like your work, and I've watched you over the years evolve, and they finally see one that just speaks to them.
yeah.
So,
It's very nice to see that in a collector. Um, that they follow you a little bit, and they may buy a piece every era that you follow based on the work that you're doing or something like that. But the person walking in off the street, it's rare that they impulse buy something that unless something is really hitting them. I found in landscape painting, it'll be a remembrance of that lake scene or of that mountain, and
yeah,
they may buy it right away. And this is, oh, that's what I want, and they're
it's
gone.
a souvenir, kind of.
Yeah, yours is a different niche, and I can see that. Like you're selling something that is. I think people need to find themselves in your work, whether it be that mountain scene or a piece of abstract work. I think they resonates with them, right? You're trying to find, and I think some artists try to pre-make that. They try to buy into that system and try to paint to the market. And it's nice when you can just paint what you want to paint and your market accepts what you're doing, right? And like you
Yeah,
said, that one customer comes and buys a piece from years ago. So
yeah.
yeah,
I had another person who was following my work for years. She came to all my openings. And finally, she said, after about maybe 5 or 6 openings, I'm going to buy one of your paintings someday. And eventually the day came, and she did buy a nice one. And she was redoing her condo, and she bought my painting and did her decorating around my painting. And I was just so thrilled
yeah,
because she had been developing that. She said she'd always liked my work, but she would know when she was ready. So you have to let that, I think, mature in a person that wants your work.
yeah.
I don't have a lot of people that buy my work, but when I have to give a couple of 1 or 2 paintings every year for a fundraiser for our cooperative, and they always go. People love the work. And I always say, if you're going to donate something really good. Don't donate
Yes,
something
sure.
you're going to regret later.
Yeah, no, very true. You it might be smaller pieces or something, but make sure they're good, because they will hang around your neck for the rest of your life if
Absolutely.
you let the bad one go because nobody else wanted it. It's a tough thing to do, is to have a regular burning of your pieces. And
Yeah.
yeah, we have a small art group around where I am, and occasionally we'll have a cleansing of the studio, and everybody shows up with a little bit of work that they've been meaning to get rid of and burn or whatever, and so we'll have a sacramental fire.
Well, that sounds like fun.
Yeah, it is. It's not great for the environment because some people got oils and different things, but I think there's not that much of it being done. But I think it's to watch people do the little dance before they put it into the fire, and or a talk, or they speak about something before they put it into the fire. And some people, don't burn that one, and nope, too late, in the fire it goes. So
Yeah.
it's a great piece of theater. If you ever have to do something like that out on somebody's acreage or farm, it's and you have a number of people that have, I know I have stacks of drawings on poor paper, on newsprint. They won't last a lifetime. They'll fall apart. You have to do something with them, and so sometimes those go to the eternal flame. But anyway, those are fun things to do, and I think sometimes we need to make those kind of tough choices. But this,
I got rid of a lot of drawings. When I was going to drawing school, I used to roll them all up and date them. And I kept some, but I just had one of those clean outs. I was kind of sorry after, because when I was at another cooperative, curator from the local museum came over and he said, well, he was admiring the source. Now curators want to see the source drawings from your work, not just the work. So it's good to keep a few of them.
keep a few for sure. It's hard to, because a lot of times when you are, say, in a life drawing session, the warm-ups, a lot of times the warm-ups on junk paper are the best. The gestural 10 drawings before you get into the sitting. And you pull back from using good paper for a lot of those things. You just put them on newsprint or whatever you have to get ready for your session. And it may end up being in oil or not on paper. It might be a canvas or a board that you're working on. But yes, keeping the history is kind of nice to do. Those kind of things. Now this piece here, did it have a yellow field as a background and then you overpaint? Yeah. This one had a yellow. I can see that in the grays that are coming through as the background field. Yeah.
That's kind of a pewter I think I was using there, or micaceous iron oxide.
Okay.
Something with a bit of texture in it.
Yeah.
But yes, the yellow. I painted some of them with a yellow background, and some had orange, some had red, and then there was a black one.
Yeah.
So, and these are variations of lemons, and it looks like pears and everything else. I just thought of something when I looked at this piece now. This is a larger piece, so it was 36 by 48. I had 3 that size, which is small for me. But as I said, there weren't a lot of large canvases available at that time, so it worked as a series. But I used to take a life drawing and painting from Graham Cottrey when I was at OCADU. And I always liked his work before I ever saw him. I saw it in the gallery, in the Isaacs Gallery, and I liked the drips. And I said, yeah, I want to paint like this guy, and I want to get inside his head. And lo and behold, when I was at OCA, before it was OCADU, he walked into the room and he was teaching across the hall. So the next term I was in his class, and I took a few classes, and I did a lot of portraits. And one of them, I said, I don't know what happened with this one. It just looked like a scarecrow kind of thing. And he said, oh, well, you just reached within your depths and pulled out from really deep. So,
yeah. No, classes are good to take, and I think when you're ready for them to do those. Sometimes, do you find sometimes you have to unlearn what you've taken as far as the classes, or when you went through university?
Yeah, they always used to say that, like that you
Occupying a
couldn't
little bit.
at you unless you'd been away for 10 years and you'd unlearned everything you ever learned. But yeah, no, I found that I think I was always headed in this direction, so it wasn't too hard a change to make.
Yeah. Okay.
Now there's another figure. That's the boldest ones I've ever done, I think.
Hmm.
But it's back to the Kate Kollwitz series, and I brought the catalog. I don't have it here with me now, but it's all black and white figures. And one I can think of was two figures sitting at a table, and it was called The Table, and it's kind of about the silence when people aren't talking to each other at the table, kind of things like that. So this is more of an action figure.
Yeah.
There was no reason, I just painted. And I like the fact that it went off the edge and that it's like it's continuing on beyond the canvas.
Yeah, you could have people sitting on the bench together, all texting. Nobody's talking.
Yeah.
I think I've seen that before as a photo, which is really funny. And actually you can see the conversation. They're almost having conversations on their phone, but they are not talking to each other, right? Verbally.
Yeah, they make appointments by
Yeah.
text for a phone call.
Some days I wonder that if we're going backwards, but
Yeah, I don't know. It's strange. Well, there's one of the big ones. That's from my Niagara Falls series.
this one really changes up. I mean, we had a huge warm palette section in the front end here. And this one has, go ahead, tell us about this, how this Niagara Falls one works.
Well, the Niagara Falls series evolved out of something I know really well. Like my water and landscape series are from things that I know. And I took a workshop with Stephen Quiller years ago too, because I used to do watercolor and he taught media. So I went to Colorado to study with him. And he just basically said, like, really, really know your landscape or what you're going to paint. So it's kind of gets in their skin. So we've been going to Niagara Falls for years because it's just a short drive from Toronto. My husband and I will often go down just for the day and drive by the falls and see it, have a nice meal. I have some work in a small studio gallery there, the Niagara Gallery. So we go down and visit with the owner, Steve Wilson, periodically, and we see the falls. And we see them in winter when there's been ice hanging from the branches, and I've taken some pictures. And in the winter, it's a cool palette, and the water is dirty, and the snow at the base of the falls is dirty. So this is the swirling energy of the falls. And it's in different colors. Some of them are colored. This is reminiscent of the lights that they put on the falls at night. They have a light show where they have different colors that go on the falls. And so I'm kind of mixing up my ideas with the actual energy of the water. And this one is huge. It's, I could look it up.
That's okay. Yeah. So you never painted from the Maid of the Mist up, looking up at the fall?
But I've been on the Maid of the Mist and got soaked to death, so I couldn't see anything. Niagara Falls in winter #6. That one is 40 inches by 60 inches.
Yeah.
And they're all acrylic.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Yeah.
There's another one.
And this one is on board. It's one of a two-piece one.
Mm-hmm. I really like this one. I think the scraping aspects, I think, is what I really like about it. And I don't know if there is or not, but it feels very trowel-like. I guess I'll put the little teeth in them,
I think a lot of, I've used
action
professional palette knives, but I find in my last series, and in this one too probably, I used a really cheap kitchen knife with the serrated edge. And this is quite raised and textured. And it was when I was hanging the show, We got all the pieces up, which were quite large, most of them. There's a few small ones. And then we had these two left, and they were so heavy and we were so tired that I just had one leaning against the wall and one on the floor. And I said, you know, that looks good that way. So I had one on the floor and one on the wall. And it just looked like as if you were immersed. You were going into the base of the falls and being enveloped by it. So it was a happy accident. I used to take watercolor, and I evolved from the happy accident concepts into greater experimental painting.
Yeah, I think watercolor is. I think every artist should start with watercolor because it's inexpensive, but the other thing, it's unforgiving. It frees you up. It does a lot of things. You can paint just about anything after you've done watercolor well. You understand color better. You understand how paint moves, everything, like how it absorbs, how it doesn't absorb, and then if you go into acrylics and oils and even printmaking, you can understand so much more because you have to have a bit of a preconceived idea a little bit in some watercolors. Some are more abstracted that you work with wet into wet and things and discovering new things. I think it's an adventure every time you do a watercolor, unless they're, supremely tight little things. I love this one though, because there is that feeling of water movement and banging against each other, the molecules as they churn.
The froth of the water.
And
So this is a subject I know really well. And this is a case too, where, when you look at a traditional painting and a juror's show, they will talk about where is your focal point. And you learn that from watercolor too. You never have a triangle on the corner, and watch your perspective and where are your focal points, and the golden grid where you just have it not at the intersection, but just a little off to create more excitement. But in a painting like these, the whole painting is the focal point. It's a different concept when you moved into certain areas of abstraction.
Yeah, this one has a real frost feel about it. It's got a nice.
Yeah, it's a nice wintry one.
Yeah,
it's huge too.
Yeah, it's got. It's time always goes by fast, but
yeah,
I appreciate you taking the time to talk about your work. This was excellent. Yeah, well, it's people don't. They like to see and understand. So this is a great way to talk about your work and explain a little bit about your processes a little bit and how you're working, and we really appreciate you taking the time to do that and help us out a little bit. And I think we're getting close to our close here, but well,
I appreciate your chatting with me as well.
Yes, you are correct. We're getting close to our close, but we're going to do after the paint dries. So for everybody that wants to get more insight, they can watch that. So we're going to run the credits and we'll be back in 2 seconds.